More than 10 years ago, Premium replaced the major and manager models. The good old hard workers have dispersed to almost all continents, including Africa. In other countries, having long passed the mileage mark of 2 million kilometers, they continue to carry goods, striking with their indestructibility. At the same time, many of them are exploited by no means in a gentle mode. Already during the world premiere in Barcelona, Premium was presented in two basic versions, route and distribution. Both were supplied to our country. During the release of the car, several thousand Premium were imported, mainly in the version of truck tractors. In 2006, 400 Premium DCI vehicles were sold in Russia through Renault trucks alone. Specialists divide Premium into DCI, first generation, and DC, new range. The designation DCI owes the car to the engine with the common rail system and electronically controlled VMAC. This system analyzes various operating parameters of the truck and calculates the optimal injection timing. This improves fuel combustion, improves engine performance, and reduces fuel consumption. By the way, according to this criterion, Premium is one of the best representatives of heavy-duty commercial vehicles. In addition, VMAC controls and regulates the braking process, controls the engine brake and the transmission retarder. The system also includes cruise control, which ensures optimal driving in the selected mode. The VMAC complex includes two blocks that capture information from the engine, brake system, gearbox, and process it in real time. The acquired data is stored for diagnostics and analysis of operational information. Carriers do not remember cases of VMAC exit due to the fault of the manufacturer. The common rail electronic injection system also belongs to the advantages of the machine. It ensures the maintenance of torque at low speeds, reduces the noise of operating units, and optimizes the technical characteristics of the engine while driving. Moreover, it takes into account the peculiarities of the driving style of any driver, gives him confidence behind the wheel, and really reduces fuel consumption. The first generation Premium received an Airtronic rear air suspension with airbags, the volume of which is controlled electronically. To facilitate the work of the driver, there is a remote control that allows you to raise and lower the saddle level in the range of 240 millimeters. All this makes the coupling and uncoupling of the tractor with the semi-trailer as simple as possible. And for machines working with low removable equipment, front and rear Airtronic integral air suspension with electronic adjustment is provided. The range of the front is 200 millimeters, the rear is 240 millimeters. According to carriers, they had no problems with pneumatic elements. French cars use air-actuated front disc brakes and rear wide drum brakes. On 4x2 truck tractors, all brakes are disc brakes with EBS, electronic braking system, and WCS, wear control system, pad wear control system. There is also a CCS, coupling force control system, braking energy distribution system, and WMS, wear monitoring system, brake wear information transmission. But there are no special complaints about them, with the exception of the flying out springs. Before the model was discontinued, the designers did not manage to solve this problem, so it is typical for absolutely all modifications. Premium uses engine braking to effectively reduce speed. In this case, the braking power is 220 kilowatts at 2,100 minute 1. The gearbox is fitted with an intarder hydraulic retarder with a retarding power of 500 kilowatts. According to transport workers, it is quite reliable and resistant to overheating. Braking performance remains unchanged even with frequent use on mountain roads. Good words deserves the drive axle without wheel gears are 1370. It has excellent energy characteristics and almost never fails carriers. It is not surprising that many service specialists at branded service stations found it difficult to answer what its real resource is. They did not have the practice of replacing under warranty. For work in difficult conditions, axles with wheel reduction gears are provided. However, the practice of using tractors in Russia has shown that for most transport companies this is an extra expense. In Russia, Premium is found mainly with two types of cabins, single and privilege, although there are only 3 of them. Doors with spaced hinges open at an angle of 90 degrees. Together with wide and deep anti-slip steps, they provide easy entry and exit. True, the lower step suffers greatly from moisture, dirt, and mechanical stress, bumps on curbs, hitting potholes, etc. The floor in the cab is at different levels. In the area of the driver's seat it is lower, and in the domestic compartment, which occupies 2/3 of the cab, it is somewhat raised. The total volume of shelves and drawers in the single cab is 350 liters, and even more in the privilege. The recreation area is a salon that combines the functions of a passenger seat and a sleeping shelf measuring 2x 0.8 m. A second folding shelf was installed on request. The internal height of the cabin is 2 m, which allows you to move at full height. The ergonomics of the driver's seat is also on top. All the most important things are at hand. The tachograph is easy to use thanks to the sliding panel, the same type as the CD player. Some people manage to break off the moving part, but here you can only blame the one whose hands are used to access. The driver's high seating position allows him to fully control the situation along the route and navigate in changing traffic conditions. Truckers note a good rear view in the absence of dead zones, quick thawing, and fogging of mirrors when the heating is on. In addition, according to them, the good location and shape of the exterior rear view mirrors protect the side windows from pollution, which is not a trifle in Russian conditions. To optimize the load capacity, Premium was produced in two types of tractors and trucks with the 4x2 and 6x2 wheel arrangement. Trunk tractors with a saddle height of 1,100 mm were intended for towing semi-trailers with side loading and unloading with an internal height of 2.70 m with a capacity of 100 cubic meters and a capacity of 34 euro pallets. Trucks with 4x2 and 6x2 trailers with a frame height of 850 mm and a third axle with single wheels were designed to form road trains with a useful volume of 120 cubic meters, designed for 38 euro pallets or 30 ISO pallets. Exclusively for the Russian market, two premium specifications were created in succession, Vostok and Vostok 2. They were maximally adapted to the operating conditions in our country and reflected the main wishes of the carriers regarding the vehicle configuration. On the machines of the Vostok 2 series, the AFI 2000 instrument panel is installed, which displays fault codes on the onboard computer screen. In the event of a breakdown on the track, the driver can see through the menu of this scoreboard what errors the electronics are showing, and find the decoding in the instruction manual. Having received the information, he decides whether to stop and wait for technical assistance or get to the nearest service center on his own. On the Vostok 2, which was adapted specifically for Russia, thermal insulation of the cabin was initially installed, which, by the way, is not on the European versions of Premium DCI. This option is not in demand there due to the mild climate. The heating system is more reliable, because the rubber tubes are made thick, in accordance with the climatic norm. The engine cooling system is designed to work with antifreeze at ambient temperatures down to -40 degrees Celsius. Vostok 2 was delivered to Russia with only one type of cabin, high deep. From abroad, cars with a high cab, but without a berth, or with a berth, but in a low cab, were often brought in. Both are not suitable for Russian carriers. However, many take what is available. Vostok 2 was equipped with an autonomous heater with Basto at 2000, which allows you to heat the cabin in the parking lot with the engine off. The onboard ventilation and heating system works more efficiently than on European versions. This car has heated side mirrors, so there is simply no need to lay additional electric lines or install heated reflective elements. The onboard computer and electrical equipment are designed to work in more severe conditions, at low temperatures. So if you choose between a car from the EU and the Russian specification, it is better to give preference to the latter. For a new car, the first maintenance was at 20,000 kilometers, then the step was 30,000 kilometers. This figure is taken from the operating conditions, and in Russia they are very strict. If we take the prices of the Leon Truck Service Station in Solnechnogorsk, Moscow region, then the cost of the minimum maintenance with the replacement of filters, oils and standard work according to the Renault technological map is 13,500 rubles. If the oil is semi-synthetic or synthetic, then with additional work the carrier will have to fork out about 16,000 rubles. And when changing the oil in both the bridge and the gearbox, the amount rises to 22,000 rubles. Package cars for Russia came with side folding fairings and a roof spoiler. These devices not only reduce fuel consumption, but also, thanks to their mobility, provide better access to the rear of the cab, even when the tractor is coupled to a semi-trailer. In European transportation, where the distance is covered, as a rule, in one day, short cabins are often used, which are unpopular in Russia. Our carriers are ready to take, and are actively taking, British transport citizens with the right steering wheel, but not with an orphan cabin. A passenger cabin with a rear compartment for 4 people was also offered as special equipment, with seat belts for each passenger. If desired, it can be used as a bedroom, but this equipment did not become a hit in our country. The work of a trucker is too hard to infringe on a driver on vacation. And that's why we love Premium with the most comfortable privilege cab, of course, with the exception of auto transport couplers with a low ceiling. The largest list of works falls on cars bought abroad from hands or from European trucking companies. It is quite difficult to find out in what real conditions the Premium was operated and in what condition its components and assemblies are. The fact is that most of such equipment comes without proper documentation. It is possible only through the engine control unit during diagnostics to determine the mileage of the car. By mileage, it is easy to calculate the motor resource. According to the norms, 1 hour is equal to 50 km of run. The rest is determined visually, that is, by eye, since in some cases a service book is not attached to the machine. There are also simple devices that allow you to determine whether the cabin was repainted, i.e., had mechanical damage. To do this, just put the tester to the surface, and it will immediately give out the thickness of the paint layer in microns. If it turns out to be higher than the factory norm, 100 microns, or the device does not give readings, it means that the layer of primer and paint exceeds the original values. But even if the car has not been in an accident, you usually have to carry out an impressive list of work from changing the oil in all components and assemblies to adjusting valve clearances and replacing individual parts. Such a machine will have to be left in operation for 6 to 8 hours, that is, in fact, for the whole day. It must be borne in mind that right-hand drive cars have their own specifics. Their plus is more reliable electrical equipment, and the minus is additional costs for service maintenance in Russian conditions, including conversion to a left-hand drive version. The fact is that there are no alteration schemes, and it is very difficult to figure out which harnesses should be repacked where and how. If in the usual version the car is serviced by one electrician, then here there are two, and this is exactly 2 times additional costs for norm hours. The most unpleasant thing is that a lot of electrical problems arise precisely after the conversion of a right-hand drive car into a left-hand drive one. It is important to remember that Premium is not designed for on-road repairs. Even an oil change is recommended to be done at a service station. Each machine has an onboard computer that monitors operating parameters and alerts the driver to service intervals. The display shows information that after so many kilometers you need to call at the station for scheduled maintenance or an extraordinary oil and filter change. During a visit to the service center, the work performed is either reset to 0 or transferred to the next time. And on your own, you can do more harm than repair. Experience shows that carriers are not always aware of what kind of oil to treat the engine. We are not talking about pouring exclusively the same product with the same degree of viscosity, although this is precisely the most competent approach. If the engine uses semi-synthetic 10W40 and there is no oil of the same brand, topping up any semi-synthetic 10W40 is allowed. And when using mineral oil 15W40, you can restore the normal level with the product with the same designation 15W40. It would seem that a common truth, but a certain part of the drivers do not adhere to it either. There are teapots who add mineral water to semi-synthetics and vice versa, believing that nothing bad will happen. Sometimes you have to explain with such culebins on your fingers. They say, you can't drink milk with lemon juice, it will curdle. So, oils with individual additives that are different in properties, instead of being useful, harm the engine. The precipitate that falls out in this case can seriously affect the resource of the power unit. How to convince another driver that each grade washes off the existing oil film and develops its own. The bad thing is that during this period of castling, the engine may experience oil starvation, and rubbing parts receive an increased degree of wear. By the way, the manufacturer does not recommend flushing the engine when changing the oil due to the risk of increased wear of the parts of the cylinder piston group. The benefit of repairing at a company service, and not on your own, is that the contractor gives guarantees for the work performed. At official Renault trucks dealers, everything depends on the types of operations. For example, fuel equipment is not guaranteed at all, since it is impossible to determine how high-quality fuel the client is refueling. The undercarriage and engine, when the manufacturer's fault is installed, are covered by a 1-year warranty. In the event of a breakdown of the unit or a malfunction in some system due to the fault of the service, the replacement for the carrier is free of charge. Pros. The summary of most carriers delivering goods to the Renault Premium is this: in general, the car is reliable. Very reliable engine. As practice has shown, DCI 11 runs more than 1 million kilometers without problems. Of course, provided that maintenance is carried out in a timely manner and in full. Neither in Russia, nor in Belarus, nor in Ukraine are there any cases when the DCI-11 engine was changed under warranty. There was not a single failure due to the fault of the manufacturer. There were no complaints about the bridges during the period of the factory warranty. If there were any cases, it was only through the fault of the operators. By the way, currently bridges under the Renault brand are produced by the American company Renault. Gearboxes, ZF gearboxes, fail extremely rarely. The high reliability of transmissions of this brand is also confirmed by the loads that these products withstand during the most difficult Dakar rally raid. And those episodes that service specialists talk about occurred due to the fault of drivers who unknowingly violated or deliberately neglected the recommendations of the manufacturer. Usually problems arise due to the fact that the driver did not keep track of the lack of oil or did not notice the oil seal leaking. The front brake pads take care of 200,000 kilometers. There are no problems with them, provided that the driver carefully monitors the condition of the springs and calipers. If you miss the moment when the calipers begin to dangle, the pads can quickly break, since they are designed for clamping load and not for vibration exposure. The rear pads run 600,000 kilometers. With proper care, there are no problems with them. But if the ratchets are not injected or they begin to wedge and bite, the clamping springs fly off. Rubber on the drive axle runs approximately 350,000 kilometers, on the steered axle, about 300,000 kilometers. But this is under constant control by the driver. If he overlooked that the tires are eating up somewhere, the resource is reduced not by percentages, but by several times. Minuses. Carriers do not hide the fact that many of those who bought premium new, without mileage, switch to maintenance on their own at the end of the warranty. The reason lies in the fact that the salary of the mechanics of the enterprise is cheaper than the payment of standard hours at a company service station. It's one thing when it comes to planned operations. It's not a sin to contact a professional service center, and it's quite another when you need to transfer the engine, gearbox, sort out the rear axle, or assemble one worker from two broken cars. However, in practice, more and more Russian transport companies use a mixed service scheme, at their own and at a foreign service, or completely trust maintenance and repair to Renault truck specialists. In general, Russian truckers say that premium requires more attention to technical care than the same Magna. For example, behind the front silent blocks you need an eye and an eye. Here, as with semolina porridge and milk, I didn't notice, I ran away. Only in the case of silent blocks, the missed moment of replacement turns into additional and, what is most offensive, unjustified expenses. The cheapest part can be bought in Belarus for 15 euros, in Russia it will cost more, and replacing the bracket will lighten your wallet by 250 euros. Imagine how many kilometers you can drive on diesel fuel bought with this money. In the undercarriage, it is important to ensure that all rubbing parts receive a sufficient amount of lubrication. Basically, problems arise due to the fact that carriers do not bother to inject the car on time. Accordingly, there is an increased wear of parts, components, and assemblies fail. In this case, a simple repair is not enough. At least you will have to spend money on spare parts. There are also characteristic sores in the form of guide calipers that often fail. In this case, they begin to rattle, creating sound discomfort to the driver and attracting the attention of others. On the chassis, the bushings of the springs require attention, but if the bolts are lubricated and regularly injected, then they rarely fail. But threaded connections tend to turn sour from corrosion. The car is reliable, it breaks down a little, so other nuts do not unscrew for a year and a half, and for them to stick, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks of winter are enough. The same ladders are so securely held in threaded connections that they simply have to be changed. Hence the conclusion of the repairman: the most time-consuming work on used cars is in the chassis. The lightening of the car's structure by using aluminum instead of traditional steel led to problems with the rear but especially the front cab suspension bracket from the beginning. Bushings, silent blocks can be attributed to trifling details, but it is they who destroy the comfortable working conditions of the driver. This is one of the most common complaints among first-generation premium owners. Considering that most of the cars of this model currently used in our country came to us with decent mileage, it is not difficult to imagine the scale of the problem. There are also complaints about the high cost of some elements of onboard electronics, in particular, fuel injectors. Replacing them is not cheap, less expensive, but comparable in importunity to the failure of the springs on the brake pads. Under load, they periodically pop up. Most often, the springs remain inoperative and require little correct intervention by the driver. But sometimes lost elements have to be taken from donor cars or from another set of pads. The weak point of the old Premium is a 4-circuit crane. It is reparable, but when servicing, you always need to change the plastic cover. And earlier it was more convenient, because there was a cover made of duralumin. But there are even more weaknesses in the electrics. There are such wiring harnesses that fray, decompose over time. Short. Service specialists claim that this is unavoidable on any commercial vehicle. There are no specific SORs in the onboard network on Premium, which are characteristic due to a manufacturer's error. And due to the fault of drivers and mechanics of enterprises, failures are very different. Sometimes this happens through negligence. For example, it is enough not to notice a detached clamp, the wires are frayed, and the control unit or some kind of unit fails. There are problems of failures of control units and pumps of an autonomous furnace and other devices, but this is not widespread. Minor difficulties arise with the fuel equipment in cars with a mileage of 0.5 million kilometers. Since such cars come mainly from abroad, it is easy to understand the cause of the problems. Diesel fuel is of good quality there, while ours leaves much to be desired. Under Russian operating conditions, a lot of water gets into the fuel equipment, and the units, of course, fail. Both high-pressure fuel pump and electronically controlled injectors are subject to replacement. At the same time, it is not the electronics that fails, but the mechanical part. It does not withstand the effects of dirt, moisture, solid mechanical particles. In general, all this is fixable, but the fuel equipment is not eternal. It has to be changed at a run of 500,000 kilometers. Under this resource, many European carriers are trying to sell a car so as not to incur significant maintenance and repair costs. In our conditions, in order to protect themselves from unnecessary expenses, carriers install separators that monitor the passage of water through the fuel system. You can put both original and non-original. The original is definitely better. Firstly, it starts to work autonomously already at a temperature of +5 degrees Celsius. Secondly, it comes with heating, which is important for our climate. The most frequent requests from customers of branded service stations are related to the running gear. Here, the most common types of orders are the replacement of spring bushings, pivots, depending on the mileage. This is typical for vehicles with large numbers on the total meters of the distance traveled. And new cars rarely come to the service due to problems with the chassis. Even those cars that were operated in domestic transportation did not show weaknesses in the suspension. The total resource of Renault Premium in Russian operating conditions is estimated by domestic carriers at 500 to 800,000 kilometers, after which a period of increased costs inevitably sets in. Sometimes it is more expedient to use a completely old and technically dead car as a donor for spare parts than to repair it endlessly and risk delaying the delivery of goods to the customer.